The first time I met Sharon Vandel, she was standing in my driveway, arms crossed like she was about to issue a parking ticket on my own land. "You can't have that RV parked there," she said, nose wrinkled like she'd sniffed spoiled milk. "It violates our HOA aesthetic guidelines." I leaned against the fender, chewing a toothpick. "Sharon, I'm not even in your HOA," she blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Excuse me?" I pointed down the gravel road that ran behind my barn. "That little stretch your HOA uses to get to your gated kingdom. It cuts through my land. I just inherited all 200 acres of it from my uncle, Walter, and I've got the survey and deed to prove it." Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Sharon was the president of the Larkspur Ridge HOA, a neighborhood packed with vinyl-sided mansions and matching mailboxes. The type of place where every lawn was mowed at the same angle and people got fined for having the wrong color mulch. The access road the HOA used to get in and out of Larkspur Ridge. It was a dusty lane that ran right through the south end of my inherited property. Uncle Walter never cared. He let them use it for free. But Walter also didn't have Sharon marching up his driveway threatening to fine him for visual pollution. I didn't plan to be a jerk, but Sharon made it real easy. 3 days later, I got a letter from the HOA. Certified mail. It claimed I had exactly 7 days to cease and desist obstructing HOA access or face legal action. Attached were grainy photos of my RV, a chicken coop that wasn't even mine, and a highlighted portion of the HOA bylaws. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my coffee. I responded with a simple letter. 1 sentence. "Your access road sits on my land. You have no legal easement. We can negotiate one." That's when the real games began. Sharon called a special emergency board meeting and invited me to attend. I showed up in jeans and a flannel shirt still dusted with sawdust from my workshop. Sharon wore a pantsuit like she was hosting a Senate hearing. "This is a serious matter," she said, tapping her acrylic nails on a stack of printed bylaws. "The HOA has used that road for over 20 years. That gives us prescriptive easement rights." "Not if Walter gave you permission," I said, flipping open a manila folder. Which he did in writing, found it in his files, dated, signed, and notarized. Gasps from the board. Sharon's face flushed. "Then we'll fight this in court," she snapped. "Sure," I said. "But while you're in court, I'll be putting up a gate, and until that's settled, no one's getting to Larkspur Ridge without a long hike through the woods." Chaos. Someone knocked over a pitcher of water. Another board member whispered something about calling a lawyer. I stood and stretched. "Or you could pay me a fair monthly fee for easement rights, $2,000 a month. That gets you guaranteed access 24/7. Otherwise, consider the road closed by Friday." Sharon's jaw clenched so hard I thought I heard teeth crack. I walked out. By Thursday, they paid the first month. By the time the second payment was due, Sharon sent a different board member instead, a man in his 60s with a polite handshake and a folder tucked under his arm. "Name's Alan," he said, stepping carefully around a puddle near my workshop. "Vice president of the board. Thought we could talk through some alternatives." I led him up to the porch and poured 2 glasses of sweet tea. He glanced at the mason jar suspiciously before taking a sip. "We've been looking at the budget," he began, "and $2,000 a month is, well, it's not sustainable long term. The residents are starting to ask questions. Some of them are even wondering why we don't just build a new road." I raised an eyebrow. "You're welcome to try. But unless you've got a bridge team and a few million in spare change, you'll find the creek and those granite ridges don't cooperate." Alan let out a low whistle. "Didn't realize it was that bad. It's worse. The only other way out runs through wetland. Corps of Engineers would laugh you out of the building." He took another sip, slower this time. "Sharon's not going to like this," he said. "She doesn't have to," I replied, "but she might want to stop pushing her luck." I didn't mention what I'd found in the county records the day before. Figured I'd wait for the right moment. The next week I noticed something strange: survey flags. Bright orange planted along the edge of the access road like breadcrumbs. I followed them with a frown. They veered off the gravel and into a thicket near the creek, then deeper into my woods. The next morning, a pair of workers in hard hats showed up with clipboards and a ground scanner. "Can I help you?" I asked. One of them looked up. "We've been contracted by Larkspur Ridge HOA, here to assess the feasibility of an alternate route." "On whose land?" He checked his clipboard. "This parcel." I held out my hand. "Permit?" He hesitated. "We were told by the board that this land was under HOA jurisdiction." "Wrong answer," I said, pulling out my phone. "You've got 10 seconds to leave before I call the sheriff." They packed up fast. That afternoon, I drove to the county recorder's office and requested all recent filings from Larkspur Ridge HOA. Tucked between a fence variance and a landscaping complaint was a suspicious document, a forged easement agreement, backdated 3 years, with my uncle's name on it. Only problem: it wasn't his signature. I recognized Walter's handwriting. He'd shown me once how the loop in his W always dipped twice. The one on this document was a single, shallow curve. I made copies and drove straight to the sheriff's department. Detective Graves listened without interrupting, flipping through the paperwork slowly. His office smelled faintly of coffee and gun oil. "You're saying they forged a legal document to claim a permanent easement over your land?" "That's exactly what I'm saying." He leaned back, tapping the folder with his pen. "This isn't just a zoning issue. It's criminal fraud." The next day, a pair of deputies served a subpoena at the Larkspur Ridge HOA clubhouse. Sharon tried to intercept them at the door, but it was too late. Graves was already walking in behind them. I watched from across the street, arms folded. 2 residents stood beside me on the sidewalk. One of them, a woman in a faded yoga top, frowned toward the commotion. "They told us this was just a formality," she said. "Some minor paperwork thing." "Not quite," I said. "Looks like they tried to steal land." She turned to me, eyes narrowing. "You're the new guy, right? Walter's nephew?" I nodded. "I didn't vote for Sharon," she muttered, then walked away. By the end of the week, Graves called to update me. The forged easement had been filed by the HOA's legal counsel, one William Klein, a lawyer with a record of aggressive tactics. Apparently, he'd been sanctioned twice in the past for similar behavior in other developments. Klein was charged with felony fraud and obstruction. Sharon wasn't far behind. Texts between her and Klein revealed that she'd instructed him to handle it quietly. When asked by detectives what that meant, she refused to answer. The local paper ran a story on page 1, "HOA president under investigation for land fraud." When I stopped by the feed store that Friday, the clerk behind the counter gave me a thumbs up. "Heard you're giving those Larkspur folks a real education." "They're learning," I said, tossing a bag of seed onto the counter. Back at home, I installed a new set of trail cams, motion activated, infrared, and sending live footage to my phone. Not because I expected trouble, but because I didn't trust Sharon to go down quietly. Sure enough, that night around 11, my phone buzzed 2 figures. Flashlights. Walking along the edge of the woods near the access road, I called Graves. By the time the deputies arrived, the pair had retreated, but not before one of them tripped a wire I'd strung between 2 stakes. The resulting flare lit up the hillside like a 4th of July finale. Graves reviewed the footage the next morning. "One of them's definitely Klein," he said. "Already on bail and violating a no-contact order with the property in question. He's going back in." Sharon resigned 2 days later. The HOA scrambled to stabilize. Alan stepped in as interim president and scheduled an open forum, a real one, not one of those public comment limited to 30 seconds and no recording devices types. He called me the day before. "I know you don't owe us anything," he said. "But if you came and told your side, it might help clear the air." I agreed only because Alan had been straight with me. The room was packed. Folding chairs, people standing along the walls, even a couple teenagers sitting on the floor. I stepped to the front and cleared my throat. "I'm not here to make enemies," I said, "but I'm also not going to be walked on." My uncle let you use that road for free and you repaid him by trying to forge documents and steal the land. That's not how neighbors behave. A man in the back raised his hand. We had no idea, he said. Sharon told us you were trying to extort the HOA. I pulled out a copy of the forged easement and held it up. She filed this. It's a felony. And your HOA dues paid the lawyer who did it. Murmurs. One woman looked like she was going to be sick. Alan stepped up beside me. We're opening an audit. Every expense from the last 5 years. And we'll be holding new board elections next month. After the meeting, a few residents came up to shake my hand. One offered to drop off a pie. Another asked if I'd consider helping draft a new charter. I told them I'd think about it. On the way home, I passed the orange survey flags still sticking out of the brush. I pulled them all up, one by one, and tossed them into the back of my truck. Let the HOA make their own trail from here on out. 2 weeks after Sharon stepped down, a beat-up sedan with no plates rolled up to the edge of the access road just past dusk. I was on my porch, oiling the chainsaw chain when I heard the tires crunch. The headlights stayed off. I watched for a minute. No one got out. Then the driver's side door popped open, and a man in a windbreaker stepped out, holding a long metal pipe. He walked over to the gate I'd installed sturdy steel, locked with a bolt-cut-resistant padlock, and started banging on the hinges like he was testing for weak points. I clicked on the floodlight. Evening, I called out. He froze. I stepped off the porch with my phone already recording. You lost, he didn't answer. Just bolted back to the car and peeled out, tires spraying gravel in a wide arc. I caught the last 3 digits on a sticker still stuck to the windshield. County auction tag. I sent the footage to Detective Graves. He called back the next morning. That car was reported stolen out of Jefferson County 5 days ago, he said. We're running the plates. But I've got a hunch this isn't random. Someone sent him, I said. He paused. You got enemies? Just one. And she's running out of options. The new HOA board had been scrambling to untangle the mess Sharon left behind, but the deeper they dug, the uglier it got. Turns out the road situation was just the tip of the iceberg. I was sitting at the diner 3 towns over, halfway through a plate of biscuits and ham when Alan slid into the booth across from me. She had 2 sets of books, he said quietly. One for the residents, one for herself. We found expenses for landscaping that never happened. Invoices paid to a company that doesn't exist, even a reimbursement for a retreat in Scottsdale. He shook his head. None of the other board members knew. I set my fork down. You call the state attorney, already did. They're launching a formal audit. HOA's under investigation for embezzlement now. We were quiet for a while, then Alan looked up. I need a favor, not a big one. I raised an eyebrow. Would you be willing to let us post an emergency access sign on the easement, just a temporary one? Ambulance got delayed last week because the GPS doesn't show the road anymore ever since you gated it, and the route got flagged as restricted. I considered it. Only if you install the sign on your side of the gate. And it needs to say private use emergency vehicles only, nothing about public access. That's fair. The next morning, a pair of volunteers from the HOA came to install the sign. One of them, a retired firefighter named Joe, brought a thermos of coffee and a box of bear claws. I didn't vote for Sharon either, he said, handing me the box. And I'm glad someone finally stood up to her. By the end of the week, more residents started dropping by with questions, not complaints, genuine questions, how to get a parcel rezoned, what the county's setback laws were, whether I'd consider leasing a corner of my land for community gardens. I told them I'd think about it. I wasn't interested in becoming a local hero, I just didn't like bullies. It was Graves who called again 3 days later. We got a break, he said. The guy in the sedan, we picked him up. Turns out he was hired for $500 cash to take care of a lock. Didn't know who Sharon was, just met a guy in a parking lot who handed him the tools and a burner phone. Did you get the number? We did. And it pinged near the old Larkspur Ridge clubhouse the same night. Guess who's still been using the place after hours without permission? I didn't answer. We've got enough to charge her with attempted trespass and conspiracy to commit property damage. It won't put her away for long, but it's added to her fraud charges. State's folding it all into one case. That night, I walked the perimeter of the gate again, reinforced the posts with concrete, then added a motion sensor to the top rail. If anyone touched it again, I'd know before they even got close. A week later, Alan invited me to attend the residents' financial audit meeting. I sat in the back this time, arms crossed, watching as a forensic accountant laid out diagrams on a projector. Flow charts, bank statements, wire transfers to shell companies. One of the residents, a man in a flannel vest, stood up halfway through. "All those fines she wrote us," he said, voice shaking. "For things like non-regulation shutters and improper garage lighting, where did that money go?" The accountant didn't flinch. "Most of it